Welcome back, Introduction to Criminal Justice students. Today we're going to cover a couple slides in Chapter 8. Now I know that my online students, those who've always been based online, have already covered Chapter 8, or you're more than welcome to review this video and just see if you really comprehended the content. At the end of this video, I'm going to play some scenarios. I'm going to give you some examples. They'll be popped up on the screen and I'll read them to you. I ask that when I tell you to stop the video for a moment and then review your scenario, and then I'll ask you to come back and we'll work through another scenario. This will give you the opportunity to kind of feel like you're in the classroom environment and see that if you're comprehending or have comprehended the content that's already been reviewed. So I'm going to get rid of the video of myself, get directly to the PowerPoint, and then I'll come back to you when it's time for that scenario. So in front of you, you have law enforcement officers that have been killed in the line of duty. So this comes directly from your textbook. So you can read a little bit more of it. It's broken down, but I'll just go over it right now. It's pretty explanatory. As you see, gunfire is at 62% of law enforcement officers are killed in the line of duty by gunfire. Automobile mill accident comes in number 2, and that can be a variety of accidents. And when I say that, I think that we're talking about high-speed chases, individuals who use their car as a weapon, and law enforcement officers who have pulled over someone on the side of the road due to a traffic violation, or they're assisting a motorist. So I tell everyone that it's really vitally important that if you see those lights flashing on the side of the road, move over if you can, slow down, give those officers the opportunity to do their job in a safe environment, and that if we do that, maybe we can see a reduction in the automobile accident number to reduce. So the next slide that we're going to go over is relevant for what is going on today. I would love to have this conversation in class in person, but this is part of the reason we're not in class. So law enforcement officers are those first line of defense. And we think of those right now as nurses, EMTs, doctors, those working those essential positions at grocery stores. And we really have to think about everything outside of what our norm is when we say law enforcement officers with gunfire. That's notable because they go to those calls in those hostile environments, but they have to think of risk of disease and infected evidence. So the first one is that biological weapon, an agent used to threaten human life. And this is anthrax and smallpox, and some people can say COVID-19 really isn't that biological weapon. But if an individual knows they have COVID-19 and they are on scene and an officer is going to arrest them and they choose to cough or spit on that officer, they are, of course, at risk of that disease. And so the areas of concern right now and that are going through and have always been through, I think that are in a heightened state, is that we really need to educate our officers about these infectious diseases, how they can affect you, how are they spread. And right now, I'm sure there's mass training on this COVID-19. The second one really, I think, tends to be more towards the corrections part of our class, but I'm going to go over it because it is current. So preventing the spread of diseases and lockups, and that's going to be on the next slide. I'll go more in depth, okay? So I pulled this today from a Wired article that I read, and if you want the website, it's on the bottom of the slideshow, and I can attach it and embed it into the classroom. But they said that prisons currently are overcrowded. We already know that. In California, they're at 130% capacity. So while some inmates are housed two to a cell, there are many open dormitories. And when I say that, that's like an open pod with multiple bunk beds within it. They're not in individual cells. They sleep and live extremely close to each other. When we say that we need to spread them apart, there is no room to spread them apart. They share toilets, they share showers, they share a eating area, hallways, and it can be extremely unsanitary because of the amount of individuals we have that may not be following the guidelines of health regulations. Prisons are short on soap. And in many facilities, hand sanitizer wasn't even there because it is contraband due to that high alcohol content, and they're saying, you know, right now it is 60 or 62% that the sanitizer needs to be to really get rid of a virus. So in those areas are very low numbers. If you think about it, we don't have an abundance in a correctional facility for gowns or for masks or for gloves, and that is scary. So as we, as law enforcement, bringing it back to that topic, if we do arrest somebody and take them into a facility, are we taking them into a facility that currently has those who are positive for COVID-19? Or are we going to bring someone in there that is positive and may spread that infection to other inmates? So we have to be very mindful and use discretion on what we're going to do. So the stress of law enforcement officers has now increased as they have to think about those options on top of all their other duties that are assigned to them. So right now I've read an article that LA is also increasing or trying to increase their patrol officers, and they're really revving up their recruitment. Here in Memphis, where I live, they're already short officers, and so trying to recruit officers during this very stressful time when they can't recruit them in the norm is going to be even harder. And so when we're low on officers, or we have this pandemic, stress and fatigue increases dramatically. They have to think about the natural components of law enforcement officers. They have to really think about how to reduce the stress management is really key, but how do we do that right now? Okay, they have long hours, they're thinking about infectious disease, they're trying to keep people, I guess it's called stay in place or stay at home, and then they have to think about discretion. Are they gonna pull over someone for speeding, or do they need to employ whatever duties that are now more important, I guess, that comes out to the department? So how do they prioritize those calls and those situations right now? So of course, this is just a little model. This comes directly out of your textbook again. I'm sure we could add, and we would make a list in class of even more things that are fatigued or stressed out officers. I'll read a couple of these out loud to you. They have to think of the danger. I don't think they have boredom right now. Long hours on the job, of course, that has increased with overtime right now. Family, personal issues. Are they going home to a family that has someone that has a compromised immune system and they're worried about bringing that there? So that has added on to the personal issues and family issues. Traumatic events, law enforcement officers see those. Deaths, abuse calls, so that is also stressful and can cause extreme fatigue among officers. So this is going to be on our scenario today, is the actual use of force. So use of force is the use of physical restraint by an officer when dealing with a member of the public. Okay? Police are authorized, and know this please, to use reasonable force. Reasonable force. Of course, excessive is just that. It's the application of amount of frequent force greater than what is required. Okay, and this can be very symptomatic of problem within police officers, is where do we stop ourselves or have the ability to stop ourselves to not go to an excessive level, okay, especially in a very chaotic situation. We have to remember that we can use reasonable force, and anything above the greater force that is required becomes excessive. So here's just a kind of a continuum. I really like this. So as you're looking at the screen, you see the officer's perception. In the middle is the enforcement levels, and of course the officer's response is over on the right. So we start off at the beginning, just the mere presence of being there on scene, all right? And then we start with verbal resistant is what we see, okay? And so if they're not doing what we're telling them to do, we may give them verbal commands, maybe a light touch, such as, hey, I need you to sit on the sidewalk. while look in your vehicle and lightly touch them on the shoulder to put them down on the sidewalk. Resistance, those are those passive ones. They're just not really listening, and they may become aggressive. So what is our response? The pain complaints, a takedown to get them on the ground, and then a chemical agent. And when we think of that chemical agent, that is OC spray. Some people, the one you can buy, of course, over the counter is pepper spray, and that's that chemical agent. We're not going to use any kind of weapon on them. We see that we can do it from a distance to really get them compliant. So our perception is when someone becomes very actively physical. Okay, we might imply an impact weapon. Okay, an impact weapon or a canine. When we see that, and you guys can look it up, maybe a beanbag gun, and this can also be a taser. So now we're getting even higher, K5, that's the really aggravated physical assaultive ones. We might use strikes or holds to keep them down. And the last and hopefully least is that aggravated physical resistance, and this is that deadly force. Okay, we have to meet force with force, so we really need to look at this continuum and the enforcement levels 1 through 6, and you can look at this slideshow when you start to do those scenarios. So deadly force is likely to cause death or great bodily harm. Remember that you'll be trained to shoot in the chest. We're there to stop the threat, not kill the threat. Okay, now is it most likely to end up in death or great bodily harm? Absolutely. However, we're not there to justify death. We're there to stop the threat. Okay, and a really great key case that I would play in class, and I would have you look it up, and I'll attach the link in our classroom, is the Tennessee versus Garner. And not only is this a really great case regarding deadly force, but it's something that is here in Tennessee where you guys currently reside. I really like this on the second to bottom one, is very few officers ever fire their weapon at a suspect during their career. And in class, we've discussed how media shows those situations because that's what gets attention. But numbers and percentages show that it's very, very low that an officer does fire their weapon during their career. Now, suicide by cop, you might wonder what that is. That is when an individual may come out in a scenario I could give you would be that you report to a home with someone with a weapon, and they're making threats towards the officers, they're making threats to individuals in the home. What their ultimate hope is that an officer kills them, okay, kills them. They're not there to kill themselves. So ultimately, this results in suicide by cop. Federal deadly force policies say you can only use deadly force in the defense of life to prevent escape of a dangerous fleeing subject. With verbal warnings, always give verbal warnings if feasible. Warning shots are not permitted. You cannot shoot someone or shoot by them and say, that's a warning shot, next time I'm going to actually shoot you. That is not permitted. And you cannot fire solely to disable a moving vehicle, okay? You can shoot at a moving vehicle, but it needs to be in defense of life on that top one. So when you take the test too, I think a lot of people see the word non-lethal weapons, and they use that on a lot of shows and movies. That is not the name of it. It's called less lethal weapons, less lethal. Okay, those are those tasers, and those are OC spray. They're called less than lethal because some of them may result in death. If you tase someone that has an extreme heart condition, of course you don't know that when you're on scene, and it causes them to have a heart attack, that could end up lethal to them. If you spray someone with OC spray that has extreme respiratory issues, that can end up lethal for them. So they're non-lethal alternatives, but they may end up to be lethal. So we don't call them non-lethal. They're less than lethal weapons. So let's do a quick scenario I'm going to pull up for you.